Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Whitener with Bridge Innovate, and it's great to have you all here today for Leaders in the Arena. Leaders in the Arena is brought to you by Bridge Innovate. We are a consulting firm that focuses on empowering teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. We're thrilled to have you all with us today and also to have Carlene Blanding with us today. She is a frequent flyer with us on our Leaders in the Arena podcast series. Everybody loves to get insights from Carlene. Today, she's going to be talking with us about talent strategy through leadership development and how those two things relate. But first, let me introduce Carlene a little bit to you, and then I'll hand it over to her to add a few more comments. Carlene Blanding is currently the Vice President of Talent Strategy and Culture Enablement at Shaw Industries. She's been there a little over 3 years and having a number of different roles, including Vice President of HR for integrated supply chain as well. In her current role, she is responsible for all of human capital strategy, and her role is leading leadership development and talent strategy generally. Prior to Shaw Industries, she spent over 10 years in executive leadership positions in the U.S. Army, where she developed cross-functional teams, led strategic decision-making, and directed the Eisenhower Army Medical Center, especially during the COVID years, which there are many great stories. If we had more than 30 minutes today, I would get Carlene to talk to you about some extraordinary leadership lessons in that amazing environment that she was in. But Carlene, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know we had a bit of complexity getting connected. I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad you're with us now. Maybe take a moment and help the audience get to know you a little more.
Okay, well, thank you, Jenny. It's always a pleasure joining you and working with Bridge. What a great organization. But yes, I'm Carlene Blanding, and as Jenny stated, I just recently moved into a new role where I'm responsible for the talent strategy and culture enablement for Shaw Industries. And that's a mouthful, right? But what it means is that talent strategy, leadership development is so critical that organizations are truly aligning it around their business goals. And so it was so critical that I was asked to lead this organization. My background, as Jenny said, I served many years in the military, Army specifically, and my background was in healthcare more so than anything else. And so leadership lessons, right, from the military, from COVID times to today will really resonate because those are the same strategies, leadership development and talent strategies that I'm leaning on to drive success in our organization in this new role. So I look forward to the conversation this morning.
Thank you, Carlene. And you know, when I was thinking about getting ready for our talk today on talent, on leadership development specifically, and how it needs to be aligned to business goals, I saw a study from Deloitte that talks about only 13% of organizations are diligent about ensuring that their leadership development aligns with business strategy. Take us through the importance of that alignment of leadership development to business goals and how you get that done.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that that study, that percentage is so low, right? And we're in probably the most critical time in the history of our organizations where leadership development the question really shouldn't be how do you align business? The question should be why haven't you aligned leadership development with business goals? In today's environment, as you're looking the business strategy and then looking at business results, there is absolutely no way that organizations can even begin to think about success without thinking about how do we develop the leaders of today to be the leaders not only of today and tomorrow, but way in the future. And so if you're looking at this, you'll see we start with the talent planning, right? What are the skills? What are the goals? What do we need from our talents to help drive success? I'm currently sitting in a conference room because I'm at a conference. And the big thing is talent productivity, talent connectivity, talent alignment with business goals. This topic is so timely that, I'm listening to McKinsey talk about it and showing the necessity for this to take place, right? And here we are talking about it because talent planning, how do we acquire that talent? How do we develop the talent? It is so critical for leaders to understand that talent development, leadership development is not an HR function. HR enables it, but it is a leadership function. Leaders in our organization need to understand that if we do not align the development of the future, the current and future leaders, that we're at risk for what will happen when it's time for us to talk. And we'll talk a little bit later about succession. When it's time for our leaders to leave today, who will drive the success of the future? And as you talked about those stats, right? Companies that do not align it, 13%. Well, look at the stat that talks about companies that align their leadership development program with their business goal. There is a 50% increase, right, in how organizations are able to meet their goals because they've aligned it, because they've coupled it with their business goals. And I think when we think of what's happening today, the rapid pace of change, the need for us to be, dare I say, AI literate, right? This is all things AI. Everywhere you go, you hear individuals talking about it. How are we preparing our leaders? How are we making sure that we are connecting with the leaders, the development of our leaders, the goals of the company for the end result? And we're at a critical point in our history, Jenny, where this is no longer an aside conversation. This is center stage. And that is how critical this information is for us today, and aligning the leadership development programs, our leaders, how we develop leaders of consequence for our future success.
Very good. I mean, I just love how you framed that. It's really the leadership development, the leaders who are enabling the growth, right? I think oftentimes people talk about corporate goals, company goals, but they really don't go anywhere without leadership. It's just in a
Exactly.
vacuum. It's really the humans, it's the leaders who champion that to go forward at all levels, whether it's an individual contributor level, middle management, or the senior executive team. And I think that your focus around ensuring that growth is enabled with leadership development is spot on. Love it. Absolutely love it. When you think about the challenges that organizations face in mobilizing leadership development, because it's one thing for us to sit here and talk about today, oh yes, we're all in, it's important, it's critical. It's the people, the leaders that really mobilize the growth, right, through their leadership. But how do organizations start that? What's important to launching your organizational leadership?
Yes, I think the big thing there is really when we're sitting down to do our annual goal setting, right? What are we doing? What are the goals for the future? How do we align that? And if you go to the next slide, Jenny, I'd love to see kind of walk through how we're connecting the dots, right, to make sure that we're talking. So here we talk about the strategic alignment. I just hit on a few things, right? The strategic alignment. We need to ensure that we're developing the leadership, right? We're developing our leaders, that they're aligned with what's happening with the organizational goals. They're gaining and understanding what are the current skills we need for today. What are the skills we'll need for the future. If we're not able to really articulate that, and I think the challenge is that is the key challenge, right? We see great leaders, we say they're high potential. What we're missing, though, is what skill sets that they have today that will be maybe obsolete or is not needed because AI has engaged in the work environment. How do we identify that that deficit in the skills, right? To be able to say we need to develop programs that will align those skills back in place that we can now make sure it's aligned with where the business is going. So we talk about the strategic alignment first and skill depth. I think maybe all companies are wrestling with this right now, right? Because I'm sitting here and thinking it through. We as a company, we're at the baby steps in this because we have to be able to identify the skills of the future. It sounds simple, it's not. It's very difficult, and it takes all leaders, right, in the organization. It takes HR as the enablers. It takes the CEO, the CFO, the CHRO, all of the critical executive leaders to say, what is our vision for the future? What skills will we need to be able to our people to have to drive that, for us to get to that vision. And so here, the skill gap, that is a huge thing that companies are going through right now. Then we want to talk about how do we grow our talent? How do we grow our leaders? And I think this is a key environment where we can no longer rely on the old ways that we've done stuff, develop our leaders, the standard stuff. We build it in house, they come, then we check the block. And, now I believe we have to be able to look at where we are as a company, assess our internal resources. Do we have the right resources to develop the leaders of the future? And if we don't, then we need to learn how to partner and how to build great partnership with academic institutions, with other cutting edge organizations that are doing the work to see this is what we need in the future. We have to learn to partner better, right? And to be able to lean into that a lot more than I think we have in the past. And not just partner, but then what happens after we've sent our people through the training, right? What are we
Mhm.
doing back in house to make sure we're leveraging the academic engagements, the cutting edge engagements? How is our organization established enough where now we can pull on what we have taught our leaders to now drive the success of our organization? And I'll tell you, Jenny, some companies do great, leveraging and partnering. I think when we get back in house, that's a challenge because we may not have set the organization up um, in a manner where now these new leaders will start asking really hard questions. They really are now excited. They want to go. And now we don't have the environment for them to grow. That
Mhm.
is a challenge. And we absolutely need to make sure that not only are we doing those things, but we're building the base and we're building our organization to capitalize on those. And I think and as you look around, it's just a few things that, we can start. That's the beginning. We've got to
Right.
start at the beginning.
Right. And I really love how you started us off by ensuring that if you're leading talent strategy and leadership development, those are closely aligned, right? And so interdependent on each other. But the importance of being engaged at the C level to understand the corporate vision. So,
Yes.
you're just immediately creating that connection. Where are we going? What's ahead? What are the skills ahead? Right? And then you're talking about that skill gap analysis. So it's aligned to the future, not
Yes.
necessarily looking back, but looking forward. I think that's a huge call out for our group today. The other thing that I'm hearing you talk about is how dynamic we need to think about the portfolio of leadership
Yes.
development, right? So what you might have done in the past may have had good results, but you need to be challenging yourself. Do we have the right resources? Do we have the right partners? Are we constantly iterating it? Right? Are we
Yes.
constantly examining how we're developing our leaders? And one of the great things I know that you all do at Shaw Industries, you have a multiple dimensional approach. You've got academic partnerships, you've got partnerships with gurus, you have coaching, you have, peer coaching, you have professional coaching, you have real work projects, you have mentoring. So you're using a very broad approach to engaging and developing leaders. So really, really great call outs. When you think about, how the impact of this leadership development, talk a little bit more about the investment, because many times when we go to the senior executive team with, okay, here's what it's going to cost to have this multidimensional approach and to keep it fresh, there is some resistance there, especially
Yes.
in volatile times. So, talk to me a little bit how you ensure that there's this business impact. How do you make the case for the investment?
Absolutely. It has to be linked to the bottom line. You have to link it. The business case is simple. If we do not invest in the front end in our people, then our bottom line will suffer. And I think that's a challenge that sometimes when we build these programs out, we look, okay, we want to minimize the costs. We want to go on the, not as expensive. But what happens with that is that it does not connect back to what is the vision, right? What is the goal of the company, right? The business goals, right? In our company, we know clearly what our business goals are. So when we partnered and tried to build out this program, we knew exactly what we wanted to do. And we laid out, this is the cost. But what we did also was look in the future. If we do this cost today, and
Mhm.
we will see the return on investment in the future. These are the future leaders that will drive the bottom line, that will drive the the focus of the future. How do we prepare them today? And then you got to couple it with, if this is what we're trying to accomplish today, how do we connect it to
Mhm.
one, not just the bottom line, but how do we connect it to make sure we're also attracting talent when they see what we're building into our organization? When our people are able to say, they have invested in me, and I believe this is where I'm going to stay for the future. So it's all interconnected. And I always want to make sure, uh, individuals understand these are not siloed activities. It's an ecosystem. How do we assess our talent? How do we develop our talent? How do we grow our talent? And then how do we allow our talent to go forth and demonstrate the things that they have learned to drive the success of the company? So I think for anything else, right, we've got to
Right.
make sure that it's connected to the business. It's not just a nice to have thing. It is a part of the strategy. It is embedded in the strategy. The business leaders understand the role and the goal of what we're trying to accomplish, and then we get their of course support, right, and approval to move forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that this concept of looking at this investment, certainly, as you said, to the bottom line, but what does it mean to your attractiveness and getting the very top talent into your
Mhm.
organization? What does it mean to retention?
Yes.
What does it mean to productivity? Just the quality of the work that's produced, the joy that occurs every day in the team environment, the trust that can be built. There are all these other attributes that really begin to impact the performance of the company throughout that ecosystem that you're talking about. So it's not just one, sales improved, right? It's a multi-dimensional approach. One of the questions that's coming in from our live audience today is that while Shaw Industries is a very large company, do you have any suggestions about launching leadership development in a smaller business or for an organization with a smaller budget?
Yes, absolutely. There are things you can do. I think you mentioned a few that we do here at Shaw, even though Shaw is a large company. In your own organization, let's start with, do we have a mentoring program, right? Do we have a mentor? If we do not, we need to look at it. Do we have maybe a coaching program? Or we could align with another organization and do it small, right? Developing coaching, because what you're trying to do is one, understand the needs of the current folks that work for your company. This is where you can start looking at, okay, what's going on in the marketplace in general, right? How competitive are we in the marketplace? We hear in every conference, every meeting we attend, that there's still a talent war. A lot of people think, well, we're in a different. No, Mackenzie just talked about it. We are in a war for talent, right? And if you want to be competitive, let's start doing the hard work now. Let's look at, how are we doing our workforce assessment? How do we know what talents we actually have in the organization to help drive what we're trying to do? And I think that's a miss, right? What are we using in our workforce assessment? How are we doing our one-on-ones? Those are things that the company can do no matter your scale, no matter how large or how small you are, because it starts with your leaders. How engaged are your leaders during the time when we're talking about performance assessment? What does your pay for performance plan looks like? How are you communicating? How are one-on-ones? How effective are one-on-ones? How's your PX conversations, right? So for a small company, I say start there. How are
Right.
we communicating with our associates, our employees? Do they actually understand why they're a part of this company? Do they know what they that when they come into work every day that they're working towards a goal? What is that? How are we goal setting, right? What is their developmental plans? So I recommend to that person, just go back and take a look at where you are today. Look at your workforce assessment. Look at your PX conversations. Look at your one-on-one engagements, and then start talking to your managers. What are we missing? And so
Right.
once you start that, you can start laying out a framework to say, hey, I think we could use some things like coaching. I think we can start with mentorship. I think we can start with some lunch and learns. I think we can do a lot of things internal to start hearing the voice of our employees, and then really using that to build out a framework of how do we now expand it on a larger scale. What is
Right.
the engagement? What is the vision that your CHRO or your chief people officer have, right, for the HR community? Is there a vision statement? Is there a a plan that now you can align around, that is aligned with the business plan. Okay, it's not separate, right? Because
Right.
we're all at the table. How do we now fuel that into a ecosystem, right? That is not, oh, it's another new thing, but it is the thing. There's only one thing: taking care of people, developing our
Love
talent, cultivating our
that.
talent. How do we do that starting at that level? And I think you can drive that throughout.
Right. And all what you're talking about is just looking at the systems that you have
Yes.
and tapping them and aligning them to building that talent strategy and the leadership development. And something also that's simple that you might not remember, but that you have done on our show before is to bring a favorite new piece of literature, a book.
Yes.
Might be around deliberate calm. I remember we had a
Mhm.
conversation about that. It could be around, maybe you go back to, good to great, or
Mhm.
maybe a common leadership book that we use a lot at Bridge called the Leadership Challenge. For you get a digital download for each of those leaders and have, like you said, the lunch and learns and some peer coaching, and you're off to the races. So I do agree with you. I think there's a million ways that people can go at it. The commitment just needs to be there, working with your
Yes.
senior team.
Yes.
I know that we're getting closer on time, so I want to go to this question, and you know that every time I have you here, I talk about this VUCA environment because
Yes.
having been in the military and then now having been in the corporate arena, especially in some of the arenas like supply chain, where it's just been in such a volatile space since COVID and throughout, so much stress in that arena. Talk to us a little bit about talent strategy and some tips or guidance about how we deal with what we call the VUCA environment, this volatile, sort of, complex, highly
Mhm.
adaptive environment that we find ourselves in today. You've got a lot of history there of navigating a lot of organizations. So
Yeah.
give us some tips to take with us.
Yes. So I think, first of all, let's put it in context. So you have that VUCA environment, and everyone, I think, understands VUCA by now, right? The volatility of the marketplace, the uncertainty, tariffs, all of these key things that are hitting us. The complexity of what we're dealing with, right? It's not easy. And then, of course, the ambiguity. We don't know what the next thing is going to be. But I like to frame it and look through the lens of, if you know that we're in a volatile environment, what is the vision for the future? What is the vision for your company? So I'd ask you, if you don't have a clear understanding of the vision of where your company is going, it's going to be very hard to develop a talent strategy. It's going to be hard to develop a leadership development program that will drive your talent strategy, that will end up driving the vision. Then you need to understand, instead of, we talk about, uncertainty. Yeah, the world is uncertain, but do we have an understanding of where we're going as a company, right? I have an understanding of where Shaw is going. I know where we're going. And we have partnered with external agencies to make sure that they're helping us to not only clarify our vision that everyone can understand, but our understanding of where we're trying to go. We're going through huge transformation, probably like every other organization. So even more so than ever, this becomes deeply necessary for us to understand where our company is going. And then clarity in the world of chaos and in the world of, complexity. We need to clarify it for our people. When you clarify that you are important, talent is important, leadership development is important. Our associates, our employees are the core of how we drive our business success. They're not an addition, they're not an aside, they are the core element of how we're going to drive the success of our company. Once we understand that and we use that as a leverage when we talk with our C-suite, when we talk with our executive leaders, that we cannot be successful without our people. And leader development is the next key to driving the success until we understand that. And then the last thing, we all have to be, we talked about, the agility that we need. We have to be able to pivot wherever the marketplace is going.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard, especially if we've been in stable companies, and this is a new thing for us. We need to build leaders that are of consequence. We need to build leaders that are curious. We need to build leaders that develop behaviors that says something is moving. We're going to have to move with it. If we do not build such leaders, and if we do not understand how these VUCA and the vision, the understanding, the clarity, and the agility drives our business success, we will be left behind. And unfortunately, there are examples of companies that have been left behind because they were not able to take that VUCA, right, in the business, in the military sense, and then transform it into the business sense to say, you know what? This is what it is. And deliberate calm, as I talked about in the last podcast, absolutely was about that, right? Talking
Yes.
about, and I tell everyone on this podcast, take a step back, take some time, breathe, sit down and look at your company, where your company is, where it's trying to go. And then you bridge that gap with your people. Your people are the bridge to the next level, the next generation of success for your company. And I think those are the key elements that will help drive success for our people and our organization.
Amazing. Thank you. Very, very inspirational. I can tell you're passionate about this. It's something that you hold close to your heart, and it comes through in all of the work that you do and the leadership that you bring to this arena. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, Carlene. It's always a pleasure. And I just invite everyone to join us again on Leaders in the Arena. We have a number of different programs coming up. Tom White and Wendy Gibson, recent retirees as executives from Unum, will be sharing stories on leadership coming up soon. We also have a simulation on Experience, Innovation, Learn here at our studio in June, and then some great inspiration coming in from the nonprofit sector with Carrie Randolph. So check us out at www.bridgeinnovate.com/events. We hope to see you again. Take care. Thanks, Carlene.
Thank you, Jenny. Wonderful. Thank you.